but was rich enough to own land, had rights to mines, and so we might characterize Luther's childhood as comfortable. Around age 7, Luther started school, which taught 3 subjects. Now we might think reading, writing, arithmetic is the 3 subjects, right? But in Luther's day, it was grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Grammar meaning Latin. And so all of those things started in early childhood. I believed helped him much later in the Reformation. And really, rather than a full history of Luther's scholastic career, his childhood, his upbringing, I want to simply say this. Luther was a good student. When it came time for his studies, he did what he did, but he did it well. And originally, Luther, when he went to the university, was going to study law. But between his hometown and his university town of Erfurt, Luther had a conversion experience, as he would later describe it. He was trapped in this terrible thunderstorm, and lightning was striking all around him, very close. He could see it, he could feel it. And trapped in this terrible storm, like any of us who have been in some terrible situation, he cried out to God for help. And he made the vow that if he made it through the storm, if God would let him live, then Martin Luther would become a monk. He joined the Augustinian monastery in Erfurt over a decade before he would write his 95 Theses. And so his time as a monk was incredibly influential for Luther. The monastic schedule was very rigorous. He would wake up, pray. They would sing all 150 psalms every week. And so over the course of 10 years, Luther would have actually memorized each and every one of the psalms. And it was during this time that Luther completed his doctorate in addition to his responsibilities at the monastery. Because Luther, like I said, was a good student and was not just an average monk, he actually became management fairly early on. And in this time, too, as a doctor of the church, it was part of his responsibility to start to teach in the universities. And it is in these early 1515, 1516, even before the Reformation, that in Luther's writing we see the phrase justification by grace through faith pop up, which may be familiar to many of us who are Lutherans. And so then Luther moved to Wittenberg to teach at that university there, and in addition to all of his growing monastic responsibilities, taught at the university, and was the favorite preacher of the local town. Apparently, whenever they would have visiting dignitaries come, the royalty would invite Dr. Luther to preach. He was a very busy man. And so hopefully all of this paints a picture of where Martin Luther was in 1517. And for me, I think Martin Luther is a very interesting person. But here I want to change how I describe him, because for a person so interesting, I cannot think of a more boring way to talk about than to simply just give you a timeline of Luther's life. That is something, I mean, how many of us have, one of these in our pocket that we could just quite easily look that up on, and I'll let you do that on your own time. What I hope to do is between 1517 and 1546, Martin Luther led a very full life. He was a husband, a reformer, a theologian, a pastor, a friend. And hopefully by discussing Luther in these various aspects or roles he filled, I can talk a little more about Luther as a full person and give you a sense of the kind of person who wrote these 95 Theses. So first I want to look at Luther the Reformer. And to do that, I want to kind of look at his motivations. Because first of all, it should be said Martin Luther was a reformer. He wanted to reform the church. He wasn't interested in some new denomination. He wasn't interested in schism. He wanted to reform practices of the Roman Catholic Church. But in that reform, Luther had some very clear themes, which I think would recur again and again through his career. Luther cared deeply about the laity.